in March. Now Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is back here in Washington after rescheduling his visit following the deadly Gaza flotilla attack. On the agenda, the peace process, the unconditional bond between the Israelis and the U.S. government, and of course, Iran. Joining me for more on this is Norman Finkelstein. He's the author of Farewell to Israel, and Morton Klein, the president of the Zionist Organization of America. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us. Now, I want to ask both of you very briefly, what is the point of this meeting? What exactly are they trying to get out of it? Morton, you can start first.
The relationship is very bad. Obama showed himself to be the most hostile president to Israel we've ever experienced. Netanyahu is here to assure his public he has good relations with America, even though the relations are very difficult. Obama wants to ensure that pro-Israel Jews and Christians support Democrats in November. But in fact, Obama has been not made any demands of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority. The incitement to hatred and violence continues. He still doesn't support an Israeli state. He doesn't arrest any terrorists, and yet we've given him double the amount of money that George Bush ever gave the Palestinian Authority. This is really primarily political. I don't think anything substantive is going to come out of it, although I hope it does.
Now, Norman, what can you say to that? If you can just talk about what they're meeting for, but also from what Morton's saying about getting more money to the Palestinian Authority and, of course, the money that Israel's receiving for us for military purposes.
I think it's accurate to say that this is a fairly cynical move by President Obama. There is some concern that in the forthcoming congressional elections, the money won't be as forthcoming from the rich Jewish supporters of the Democratic Party, and that President Obama is trying to assure or reassure those wealthy Jewish supporters that the U.S.-Israeli relationship is still strong. Where I think Morton Klein is mistaken in his claim that President Obama is hostile to the state of Israel. On all the crucial questions, the United States continues to back Israel uncritically. So, for example, there's a consensus in the international community for resolving the conflict. The consensus is joined by virtually every country in the world except the United States and Israel. Everybody agrees that to resolve the conflict, there has to be a full Israeli withdrawal from the territories it occupied in June 1967, and there has to be a just resolution of the refugee question. The two outliers, the two opposed to that resolution of the conflict, are the United States and Israel. Or if you take the recent massacre in Gaza between December 27, 2008 and January 17, 2009, the European Union, the General Assembly, they all agreed that there has to be international credible investigations of what Israel did in Gaza. Again, the two outliers, the two obstacles to trying to get a serious investigation of what happened are the United States and Israel. So if you go down the line, U.S. support for Israel continues, and there hasn't been any significant movement by the United States to join the rest of the international community in trying to resolve the conflict for once and for all.
Now, I want to shift gears to something else, but according from what both of you are saying, that this seems to be a PR stunt simply to garner support for the upcoming elections from the pro-Zionist Christians and pro-Israel Jews here in the United States. Is there a possibility that this, it seems as though this peace process isn't going anywhere, at least in 2 years, there won't be a two-state solution. Can we talk a one-state solution, opening up the borders, equal rights for all, with Jerusalem serving as the capital?
No. Right now, you have Hamas controlling Gaza, a terrorist group. You have Fatah, whose maps, none of whose maps show Israel, controlling the West Bank. You cannot set up a Palestinian state when you have two terrorist heads of the lands that the Palestinian Authority claims. And I don't even call this a peace process. If this was a peace process, Mahmoud Abbas would be ending the incitement to hatred and violence in every aspect of his culture. He would stop naming schools, streets, sports teams, computer centers after terrorists. He glorifies terrorists. How do you get to peace with Jews when you're naming these schools and streets after people who have murdered Jews? Imagine if we named the sports teams after Charlie Manson or people of that nature. It would be absurd, yet that's exactly what's happening. And until that changes, America should be saying we're not going to be giving money, but Obama has doubled the amount of money to Mahmoud Abbas. And this nonsense that Finkelstein says about a massacre in Gaza, for 8 years, Hamas launched 8,000 missiles to try and murder as many Jews as they could. And after 8 years, Israel finally went into Gaza to try and stop these missiles. And now we've had a dramatic reduction in missiles. If they hadn't been launching missiles to kill Jews, Israel never would have gone into Gaza. Any blood that occurred is in the hands of Hamas, not in the hands of Israel.
Norman, what do you say to that? And if you can just speak to the Gaza war, but also the recent deadly attack on the Gaza flotilla people.
Well, we can look at the numbers. The rocket attacks on Israel from Gaza began in 2001. Between 2001 and 2008, that is to say in a 7-year period, according to Israel, in that 7-year period, 24 Israelis were killed. Now, on the first day of the Gaza massacre, just on December 27th alone, on that first day, in 4 minutes in that first day, Israel killed about 300 Palestinians. So it killed more than 10 times as many Palestinians in 4 minutes on the first day of the Gaza massacre as Palestinian rocket attacks killed Israel across a 7-year period. So a reasonable, rational person would say, who is the terrorist? Now, Mr. Klein says that Hamas is a terrorist organization. He says that the Prime Minister Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, they're a terrorist organization. Now, you might say they are terrorist organizations, but they're what you might call retail terrorist organizations. Let's see the wholesale terrorist organization. According to Richard Goldstone's report, the report concluded Israel launched a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize the civilian population. Terrorize. So that would put Israel in the category of a terrorist state. The difference is the numbers. The difference is the numbers. Israel killed approximately 1,400 Palestinians during the Gaza massacre. About 10 Israelis were killed during the massacre, half of them being combatants.
And Mr. Klein, what do you say to that?
Almost everyone that Israel killed were Hamas terrorists who were hiding among civilian populations, endangering civilians by being within civilian populations, which is against international law, Mr. Finkelstein, and you know that. And what is this disproportionate nonsense?
Mr. Klein, if I could just bring in the Goldstone report, which was conducted by an international panel, and Judge Goldstone himself, being a world-renowned judge, found that Israel had indeed used disproportionate force, including unconventional warheads like white phosphorus, for example. So that's been documented. Why won't anyone in the United States acknowledge that that was a credible report and put it into consideration?
Richard Goldstone has been retracting his statements and report. He's gone from one place to another saying there's no real evidence about the things that that Goldstone put in his report, and he's almost apologized for it. In World War II, we killed over 50 times as many Nazis as the Nazis killed Americans. Was that disproportionate? You must go after the terrorists and the enemy and destroy them as best you can to ensure they stop killing you. If they didn't launch those missiles, Israel never would have gone into Gaza. They started this fight. Israel simply had to try and protect their citizens and ruining their lives. You know, 150 missiles were shot almost every day. Twice an hour, Israeli citizens had to go into their basements and hide, not being able to function in life because of these missiles, ruining their lives, even if they weren't being killed. And Israel had to stop this, just like we would stop it if we had missiles coming from Canada or Mexico into Buffalo or into Houston. We would be there immediately. Israel waited 8 years and diplomatically couldn't stop those missiles.
Now, we barely have enough time to really finish this one up, but I want to ask Norman what you think about the Iran faction in this debate. They did discuss a bit about the Iranian sanctions, but also the fact that Iran is a so-called terrorizing country in the Middle East.
Well, nobody would want any country in the Middle East, or for that matter anywhere, to have nuclear weapons. And it's exactly for that reason that the signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty have strongly urged since 1995 that the Middle East be turned into a weapons of mass destruction free zone. And the only obstacle to turning the Middle East into a weapons of mass destruction free zone and curbing what could be a serious problem is Israel. Israel refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and refuses to go along with the consensus of all the signatories to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to free the entire Middle East of those weapons of mass destruction.
Morton, what do you say about that? What do you say about the fact that Israel has undeclared weapons of mass destruction?
Israel has never threatened to destroy any country. Iran threatens to destroy Israel by nuclear weapons, and the United States and the West. Israel's not a threat to anyone. Israel has nuclear weapons because they're threatened by 22 Arab countries surrounding them. If they weren't threatened, they wouldn't have to develop nuclear weapons. No one is threatened by Israel's weapons. Everyone is threatened by Iran's weapons. That's the big difference here. By the way, Iran and Hamas both call for the murder of Jews throughout the world. That includes you, Mr. Finkelstein, and your family as well. So just keep that in mind.
Right, that was Morton Klein, the president of the Zionist Organization of America, and Norman Finkelstein. He's the author of Farewell to Israel.